Hello everybody and welcome to another hobby cheating video, and today we're going to talk about making some urban ruins. So recently I came across, I started making a new 40k army, and one of the problems that came about to me is I wanted a unique basing scheme that felt more urban and more science fiction. I guess, most of the basing I've done in the past, being a mainly fantasy player, it was, things like grassy fields and lava and ice and stuff like that. It's sort of natural terrain. And that's all fine, and there are still certainly some of those you can do for sci-fi as well, but I wanted something distinctly, uh, more sci-fi, something that could only exist in sci-fi. So, I played around with a lot of things, and I eventually came to something I quite loved, and those are sort of making wrecked urban bases. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So our tools for this are going to be a base here. I've just got a standard 40 mil base. We've got our, of course, friendly cork. We've got a little bit of plasticard. You can see how thin that is. This can be fun. You don't necessarily need this. We'll talk about some options, but I happen to like it. And a good old-fashioned paper clip. So you can see so far we're not talking very expensive. Now, we're also going to mix in some basing paste. I'm going to use white pumice in this one, but of course you could always just use glue and grit, just rocks and dirt from the yard, and that would be fine. I'm also going to play around with some of the Pegasus Hobbies bricks. Lots of different companies make these little bricks, but you can use a bunch of, there's many different varieties, and it's not essential. Okay. So let's start with the beginning. When you're using cork, one of the funny things that happens is you get these pieces. You get these corners, right? Because, of course, you buy the cork in these big, massive sheets. And the problem is when you're trying to make natural stone, these corners are just a giant pain in the butt. Because, natural stone doesn't have these nicely shaped corners. However, if we're going to do something like an urban base, it most certainly does. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of lay my base down like this. Okay, so that's kind of where I want to have it. And then what I'm going to do is, just kind of being very rough, I'm just going to draw a little line there of kind of how I want to sketch it across. Just this, just drawing it with a pen. Don't need to be exact. I'm just going to kind of sketch it through there. Okay? And just kind of go through. Make sure it's nice and torn up. Doesn't need to be too exact. Who cares? And then just so I get a rough idea of the size, then I'm just going to kind of tear that out. So then what I get is a nice corner piece like that. Doesn't matter that you can see the pen, obviously, because we're going to tear that up later. Okay, perfect. So now what I end up with is something like that. All right? Now, so I've got a nice corner piece there, which, like I said, if you were just trying to simulate normal rocks, that wouldn't really be very beneficial. But what we're going to do is simulate some ruins. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my cork, which has this other flat side. I'm going to kind of place it there on the side. And I'm going to draw another little line with my pen, so I know that's kind of how big I need to go. Cool. And then I'm just going to tear a little random piece here. And what I end up with is something like that. Okay, so now you can see, I think you understand where I'm going here. We're building a little wall. I'm going to take a smaller piece. Okay, and I'm going to kind of place that here. Yeah, that looks good. By the way, you can do one wall, you can do two walls. Let's just make this one kind of small. Have a little split in the corner here. Let's do something nice and small like that. That might be a little too much. So I'm just going to tear a little piece off here. Again, you can be kind of free-flowing with this. Who cares? Yeah, there we go. I like that. Okay, so you can see what's going to happen is I'm going to end up with sort of a shattered building that's like the corner of a building that looks like that, right? So we're turning that corner piece into the corner of a shattered building. All right. But the problem with cork is that cork looks like cork, not a wall. Hence where we're going to get the plasticard, because we want it to look more like a finished building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cork, I'm going to lay it down on my plasticard. And we're going to take our handy dandy pen again. And we're just going to trace a quick line around. And I'm going to flip it out. It doesn't need to be exact, by the way. Who cares? Flip it around, because obviously cork can have different sizes. You notice I'm angling the pen, so I'm going at the bottom. And again, I'm just going to kind of trace around the side. Okay. So now I got two things that look like that. You can see those. Grab my knife, and I'm just going to go ahead and kind of cut these out. Now, the goal here is we're basically going to finish the walls off. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to record this whole thing. You notice I'm not being too exact because I'm going to do this for all my pieces. You want a nice sharp blade that cuts through your plastic card. Mine is kind of dull here, honestly. Might be time for a blade switch. Always annoying, but it happens. And if we're not exact, that's a good thing. Okay? Yeah, I didn't quite score that all the way through. That's all right. Clearly, I need to change my X-Acto blade. Don't be like me and try to get every bit of life out of your X-Acto blade. Change your X-Acto blade. Get something nice and sharp. There we go. Okay. Got that side. And there we go. Okay, great. Cool. So now we have a little piece like that. And we're going to match it up. And you can see what we end up with is something that looks like that. We've got a nice solid wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off camera for a second. And I'm going to cut little pieces like this out to all of my cork. And I'm going to make little wall sections. Now, one thing I'm not going to do is match them all completely perfectly. I want them to be kind of uneven. So in some cases, I'm going to cut it shorter so some of the cork is kind of sticking out. And you'll see why in just a moment. So I'll be back in a moment once I cut all my little pieces, and we'll go from there. All right, and we're back. So you can see I quickly fit some plastic card to the piece here. So now we've got that glued down. I went ahead and glued that piece down. Got this here. Kind of roughed up some of the edges a little bit. I'm just going to find a nice place for it. I think that looks pretty good. We'll see. Should we butt it up against all the way? Yeah, why not? You can kind of play around with it. Whatever feels good. We drop some glue on the bottom there. What's nice is we're going to do a couple other quick steps. So if we have some gaps or something like that, who cares? Not the end of the world. So there we go. We're just going to fit that right up against there. Press it down nice and tight. Okay. And there you go. Now we've got a nice little corner section of a ruined building. But we can go a little farther. Now, I'm not going to actually glue this onto the base yet. Because what I also did is cut up my paper clip into these little tiny pieces here. And now comes the fun part. If you've ever seen exposed building, you know that, like, especially future buildings, well, they've got rebar in them, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and grab some of these pieces. And we're going to push them down into this in some places that look like rebar. So, let's see. This looks like a cool place to stick it. Yeah, there you go. So you can see we just get some bars bending up. Now you notice I kept, not all these are perfectly straight. Some of these are like have the natural bend of the paper clip in them. Awesome. Great. That's wonderful. We don't want them all perfectly straight. We want them to have a little bendiness to them, be a little rough. Because remember, these are just like weird pieces of rebar that are like sticking out of a ruined building. So of course they're going to have some like, you know, where things have hit them, where they've bent, stuff like that. The reason I cut them that long, even though I only have this much sticking out, is because you want enough to sink down into the cork that it like, that you've got a good weighting to it. Okay? All right. So let's get a third piece over here. This one looks good. By the way, I like to use little pliers to do this. You can probably just stick them in with your hands too. I mean, whatever. Okay. So that's, I think right there looks good. You kind of want them on an even, you know, kind of. Oop. There we go. So now we got that. You can see we got nice little pieces of rebar sticking up. And then we're going to take, let's see, we'll do one and put it right down in there. You You see, you can just do it with your fingers too. Just kind of hurts, honestly. Like kind of pushing paper clips in can kind of hurt your hands. There we go. Nice little piece there. And then, of course, we don't want to forget the front because the floor had rebar in it too. So we're going to take one of these. And here's where you need to decide kind of the angle of it, right? And you can have them. What's cool about the floor piece is you can have these go in kind of different directions. So here, I'll have one running out this direction. Oops. There we go. But at the same time, right, because what would have been on the floor is like a grid pattern. That would have been laid underneath this before the concrete was poured. So, what we can do then, we'll flip it over here to make it a little easier on ourselves. And we'll kind of shove this one down in here, but at a different angle. Now we want to kind of make these a little bit of a grid. Oops. Come out of there. We want to kind of make them a little bit of a grid, right? So that way it looks like, you know, you get what we're going for, we're creating the illusion that there's a bunch more of these in here. That's what we want to try to sell here, right? All right, so we need one more, probably over this place. All right. So there you go. You can see we got some nice rebar sticking up out of our base. Okay. So once that's in there, what I do is I take a little tiny drop of glue and I just press it up against each one of those to kind of soak down in and lock it in place. I find it easier to do this than to try to like put them in, take them out, put in a piece of glue, feed them back in the hole. They're not going to come out of here, especially after what we're going to do as our final step. Now is the time, now that we got our nice rebar in there, now we put some glue on the base itself. We kind of line up our angle. We want to leave some blank space depending on how big you make it. Let's take a look at our edge. That looks about right there. We want to leave a little bit on the backside for reasons you'll see later. We just press that down nice and tight. And there we go. And now we got the nice little ruined edge of a base. Okay? And you can see we got our rebar in there, ready to go. So now, our next step, there's lots of places you could go from here. This gives you the basic framework of your base, right? You've got your ruins, you've got it in place. From here, you got lots of options of what you can do. Because, of course, the problem with the plasticard is it's way too clean at this point. Now, you're going to scuff this up somewhat. You can paint on damage and cracks in the wall and stuff like that. A lot of this can be done through painting, but we can also do some now. So, of course, we can get our white pumice, which I purposely chose because it's this nice, gritty, kind of paste, which will look really nice next to the rock. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take that and we're going to kind of run it and push it up against here. And we're going to purposely get some up and over this rebar. Not completely covering it, but we want it to be kind of part and parcel of this. Just going to cover the rest of the base. Kind of force it down in there, spread it around. It gives us a nice little ground texture, and so it also helps to kind of break up the edge of it. And you can see there where the piece of rebar has like buried down in that. I could either leave it like that, or I could scrape it and kind of leave it sticking out. It's kind of a nice effect to have it going down in there, looking like it's kind of buried in the dirt. But we're going to go farther with this sort of pumice or this basing grit. At the same time, we're also going to grab a little. We're going to carry it around the backside. This is going to do two things. One, it's going to cover up this cork we have sitting on the back here that's very flat. So we're adding our nice texture down here. And two, it's going to connect the back of the base and make it look like this building is sitting in, a dirt environment. So there's actually like ground around this building. We don't want it to just look like it's kind of floating in the middle of nothingness, right? We want it to look organic. Well, like the ground around it's organic. Like it's an artificial structure in an organic location. That's what I should say, right? But we're also going to use it to blend some of our lines here because, you know, we've got these little plasticard where it didn't quite match up, and that's fine because we're going to take this pumice and we're going to trace it kind of up the wall. Just kind of spread it up there. Get some nice texture up on that wall. Just like that. So you can see how we kind of drag it up there. And that'll give us some wonderful texture later when we're painting. Same thing over here on the side. You can see how I didn't quite line up the plasticard okay or perfectly. Who cares? That's why you can do this fast because it doesn't matter because you're going to just cover it over later. So if you got a little bit of an uneven thing there, it's fine. Works in our favor. We just kind of push that in there. Get a little bit of that up on there. And we're good. All right. So now you can see we've got that spread all around there, climbing up on the wall, looking like we got some nice dirt and stuff like that. We're not done yet because the ruined corner of this building, if you've ever seen, you know, like ruins that have sat around for a while, of course, what happens is you get dirt collecting down in here, like in the cracks, in the corners, and stuff like that. So we're going to spread a little bit of this paste down in here. And again, what are we doing? Well, not only are we making it kind of look more realistic, but we're also covering up our seam lines, which is great. Okay, so now what we've got is we've got our rebar in there sticking out of the wall. We've got our nice mud. We've got the corner of our ruined building. Our fig will be able to stand right on there. How much space you leave for the floor, by the way, should be based on how big the fig you're trying to place is. In other words, if you've got a fig with like a real wide stance or a wide footprint, you know, you don't want to do a real small indentation. Let's do the same thing over here. We want to make sure we kind of cover all this up, make it look real natural with how the dirt's spread around. Okay, cool. All right, so we're going to go ahead and I need to clean my stick, my spreading stick here. Okay, so the next thing we can do is, if you've watched any of my other basing videos, you know I like to use some rocks and some grit because obviously this wall would have broken down some, so we want to do that. So we're going to get out some of our black basing grit you've seen me use in the previous videos. We're going to take just a little white glue. No big deal there. And we're just going to put that in a palette here with a little bit of water. All right, so a little glue. A little water. Just like we did before. Now, I'm not waiting on this to the other cork stuff, or this other grit here to dry. I'm just going to get straight in there, mix that glue and water up, because we're going rogue straight out here. And I'm going to just kind of drop some of it in down here, all along the edge of this, along the edge of this base, so right up against the wall here, where this base would have shattered and we'd see broken stone. But I'm also going to drop it up in here on the top. Okay? Because we want this, that cork texture is going to bring really hollow wherever we can see it. So we want to kind of just spread a bunch of it up on top of this cork. We don't want much of the cork to show through. This is why I said it didn't matter if the glue wasn't too exact, because well, you know, we're going to cover it all up. Okay. Now we're going to take some of our little grit here, and we're going to just spread it right around. And how heavy we go with this can be largely based on, you know, kind of how broken up you see the building. Same with the size of the grit you use. Keep a nice space clear on the edge. But you can see now how I get that extra rock texture all along there. If you want to go farther, you can grab some sand, just like we did before. So just some good old Citadel sand. And I can take a bit of my sand. Let's get that better in frame. And right along the top, I can add some more texture. I don't need a lot of it. I just need a little bit of it down there. Kind of spread some in there so it really looks broken up. And it looks like we've got, like that, when that building shattered, all sorts of different dust and detritus and stuff like that has been captured in there. There we go. Obviously, that'll dry up nice and quick. Now, I've got to wait a little while for my paste to dry, but we can also jump into a couple other things. If we remember back to bricks, well, guess what? We can do some fun stuff with these bricks, too. So let's take a few of these bricks out. There you go. Got a few nice little bricks. Some of them are more broken than others, and that's good. That's what we want. Okay. So we grab a few bricks. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of look around at my base and figure out where do I want to place a brick or two. And so I look at it and I think, you know, the edge of this wall here kind of looks like it could have broken down into a brick. So I'm just going to quickly put a tiny little drop of super glue there. And I'm going to grab one of my bricks. Just kind of place it down there. Let's see. I think in front here I want a few. So I'll put one there, and probably one there, and one out here. So, and we can push this way down into the existing grit and dirt. You can do the bricks first, by the way, if you want them to be covered by the other grit. You can do the bricks last if you kind of want them to be out there. You want to make sure you kind of vary the angles on the bricks. You don't want them to all necessarily face the same way if it's really destroyed. Obviously, if you're trying to make some kind of brick causeway, you have to be a lot more careful. But here, we're not. We're being loose. We're just messing stuff up. Okay, and then I think I want to put one against this wall right here, because that seems cool. There we go. Nice little extra brick. Okay. Oh, let's see. Do I need to... I've got a couple more out. I got one more here. Where else could I put a fun brick? Maybe one more in here, because it's a little more tight up front. I'll add some more weight to the base itself. These bricks can also give you some more flat space to, like, place a model if you need to. So there you go. So there we go. Now we've got a fun ruined base. You can see the rebar in place. We've got our nice mud everywhere to cover this. What's our last step? Well, the final thing that I like to do is I like to let this all dry. You want everything to set nice and solid. So we got all the bricks down, let all that glue dry, let the paste dry. And the final thing I do is I either come back in with my X-Acto or another sharp tool, and I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to score up these walls. The problem is, even with our like mud and paste and stuff that we've added, this is still really, really solid. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to let everything completely set. I'm going to come back in. I'm going to show you how I finish scoring these walls up. And then I'll show you a picture at the very end of what it looks like all nice and primed up for our nice urban base. Okay? These can be great for, and keep in mind, I'm going kind of all out for this one to show you everything. You can do these a lot simpler. Like, you don't have to make every one a corner. You could do just like one, you could do the floor and some rebar sticking out and some bricks, and that can be a great urban base. The less of the walls you do, the less extra effort and plastic art you have to cut. You could do just one small wall section in the back. Even a tiny bit of vertical on the back will give the impression of a wall and will give the impression that the person's standing in a ruined building. So my advice is, if you do these for like a unit for multiple models, you want to kind of spread them out into how much of the building is there. You don't always want to have them all be this like corner piece with the, you know, one taller and one shorter. If it looks that identical across the unit or the army, it's going to start to look really hollow. Okay? So like I said, I'm going to come back. I'm going to let this all dry. I'm going to come back one more time, and I'm going to show you how I score and rough this up to prep it for its final paint. Okay? So we'll be back in a moment. All right, and we're back. So you can see everything's dry, and we've got our nice bricks in place. We've got our nice rebar sticking out everywhere. It's looking good. We got some nice ruins. The problem we've got here is that the plasticard is still too smooth. The cork doesn't look like rough wall. The plasticard is way too smooth. So there's a couple different directions you can go with this. You could take more like this grit, use a different kind of grit, and put it all over the whole wall. Something like this white paste I use here, if I did a different one for dirt, I might be able to spread this out very thin and get like a stucco wall. But if I want concrete, some of that I can achieve through painting, but some of it we're just going to want to go ahead and add in. So we've got a nice big space of wall here. So what we can do is we can take our pin vise, and I'm thinking 1, 2, 3. Let's put some bullet holes in this. That's a fun thing. So we just kind of drill in a little bit. Bada boom. And bada boom. And bada boom. We don't need it to be too deep. We don't need it to be too clever. It just needs to be 3 little round holes. Then we're going to take something sharp, like our X-Acto knife. Could be an X-Acto knife. Could be if you've got a little sculpting tool like this for green stuff. Anything like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to put some cracks, some spider cracks, coming down that we can catch with a wash later. And so we just kind of cut into it, into the plasticard around. And we just sort of make these little rough cuts. Because we want to, the bullet hole didn't hit clean. Obviously the concrete cracks. So we can kind of do big ones. We can do small ones. Right? You just don't want to be too even with it. The point being, we kind of scrape up the wall and we make these little things come out of there. So I don't know if that's probably not going to show on camera because it's very hard to see against the white. But the point is that we rough it up. The next thing we want to do, and kind of spread it apart. Be very careful when you're doing this, by the way, with your X-Acto knife. Please don't cut yourself. But you just want to kind of be random with it. Put some cuts into the wall, some breaks. There you go. So then those will paint up nice. Those will catch a wash later or something, and we'll get a real nice bullet hole effect where it looks like somebody fired sort of down the wall. You can kind of hack in a little triangle, maybe. Cut a big section out, something like that. All right? Okay. The next thing we want to do is, again, we want to take our X-Acto knife, and we just want to kind of create some texture here. So we can just scratch the wall up. Don't want anything too regular. We just kind of want to varying depths and pressing down with varying intensities, stuff like that. The point is, we're mixing and we're cutting up this wall in random ways so that we kind of screw up the texture. And I'm just dragging it over and just kind of creating some scratches and scuffs and stuff like that. All right, so you can see the scratches that I got in there. Some are deep, some are not. It's kind of all over the place. All right, so now we got some good scratches. But the next thing we're going to do, we're going to take a real rough sandpaper. This is like an 80 grit or something. Now, rough sandpaper over a very smooth... Normally you think of sandpaper to smooth something. But rough sandpaper over a smooth surface will roughen it up. This will also push some grit down into our cracks and fill a little bit of them. That's okay. The point is, we're just scuffing up the wall. Just roughing up that texture. Next up, I'm going to take this tool, just because I like it and it's useful for this situation. Because I can more draw with it than I can with the X-Acto knife. And I'm just going to scratch, 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 scratch. Alright. And a scratch, 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 scratch. What this is going to do is later, when I'm, say, dry brushing this wall or something like that, you want to make sure you get the floor too. The floor is a little easier because we've already got texture down there and stuff, rocks and bricks and things, so it's not as bad. Okay, so now you can see, look at how nice and rough that surface is, right? The point is that now it won't look as much like just plasticard that we happen to, you know, stick on here. The only other issue that you can deal with if you want to is where I attach the plasticard down here. There's still some odd spaces where where the plasticard comes over the cork. If you want to, if you really want to make it look nice, like you don't have a space there, you can grab some plastic putty or some liquid green stuff. You can kind of force it down in those holes to really like get it to be nice and filled, depending on how much you've got. If you cut it, your plasticard's smaller, you don't generally have to worry about that. But if you've got a little gap, like I've got a gap kind of right there, you can see it. You know, that's a weird texture to have, so it can kind of be nice to just force a little plastic putty in there. But on the whole, that's it. That's all there is to it. I'm going to go ahead and paint this. I'll take a picture of it, and I'll show what that looks like as the final screen here. I'm not going to paint the whole thing. I'm just going to prime it. And we're going to talk about how we paint it to sell it in our next video. So, for now, what I'm going to do is go ahead and prime and zenithal it. I'll show you the picture of that. And in the next hobby cheating video, we're going to talk about how we continue to bring this to life to sell the urban base. Now that we've got the base made, how do we actually paint it to sell that to sell the urban aesthetic completely? Okay, so there you go. As always, I hope you enjoyed this. You'll see the picture here at the end of the video. Give it a like if you liked it. Share it for more hobby cheating, or share it if you know somebody else who wants to see it and who is making an urban bases, maybe wants some new sci-fi, maybe they're getting a new 40K. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more hobby cheating in the future. And as always, it's greatly appreciated that you watched, and we'll see you next time.